It's time for Mr. Fundamental!
Presented by no one.
I can't believe how fast the NBA offseason is passing by. The draft that took place a couple days ago feels much longer than that, with all that's happening through trades and free agency. Anyways, I haven't had a chance to give my thoughts on the draft yet, so let's get into it. Based on reports, the Wolves never got close to trading the number 1 pick. Edwards fits the best out of the top 3 prospects. He has more defensive potential than LaMelo Ball right now, and fits besides D'Lo and Cat a lot better than Wiseman. He has skills and athleticism to be a 3-level scoring star. That makes him a better trade chip if the Wolves are flipping him for win-now players. His shot selection could be fixed easily with some coaching, but his main drawback is his commitment to basketball, since he did say he would give it up instantly if he gets drafted in the NFL. I think his ceiling would be like a Victor Oladipo, a two-way star who developed a reliable jumper as his career progressed. My realistic comparison would be Andrew Wiggins, and that's because of where he landed. The Wolves don't have a great track record of developing players, or even the vets to guide this young team. He'll also be playing away from his strengths next to the stars, mostly spotting up and tasked to defend the opposing best wing. This only gets amplified when you consider they have Culver and Okogie, 2 poor shooters on the wing that they need to groom as well. Absolute worst case scenario is Dion Waiters, who's barely hanging around in the NBA. I'm not sure whether the Warriors' decision to pick Wiseman was influenced by Clay's injury, but Wiseman is a great pick nonetheless. I thought they would take either Edwards or LaMelo before the draft, just because perimeter players are easier to trade nowadays, but I didn't realize how big of a market there was for Wiseman right up until the draft. Selecting Wiseman was an easy choice due to fit on the roster, but they could still flip him again if they're blown away by other offers. His ultimate comparison would be Chris Bosh, but comparing prospects to Hall of Fame caliber players could be a stretch, especially in a weak draft. I think Wiseman's ceiling would be Miles Turner, a 3-and-D big with untapped offensive potential. He'll excel in the Warriors with his 2-way rim-running ability, but I won't be surprised if they let him fire up some jumpers as well, similar to what they did with Marquise Chris. Realistically, he'll be a DeAndre Jordan for this Warriors team. At worst, he'll be a Hassan Whiteside, where his numbers don't necessarily lead to winning games. This was an easy choice for the Hornets, with LaMelo Ball as a last top 3 prospect. His skill set overlaps with Graham and Rozier, but no one will mistake those two as stars to build around. The Hornets need star power, and LaMelo could give them just that. His presence alone would help with their publicity and ticket sales, which are just added benefits. I said the Hornets could be a pretty good landing spot for LaMelo before. Having Graham and Rozier wouldn't rush his development, but they also have the shooting to play off-ball. They also have 2 two-way forwards in Bridges and Washington to cover for LaMelo's defensive inconsistencies, but they could also experiment with switching defense that LaMelo's comfortable with. The addition of Hayward only further helps with that. The only downside is that this doesn't bring us one step closer to seeing MJ and LeVar playing one-on-one. His ceiling is like a Jason Kidd, while his chances of reaching a Hall of Fame status is still up in the air. Kidd wasn't an efficient scorer, but did elevate his team with passing and timely shot making. I believe LaMelo will be a better defender in a switch-heavy NBA. Also, his ability as a passer on offense should translate to the other end as well, similar to what Lonzo did. Based on where he landed, I think the Blazers' version of Nicholas Batum would be a realistic comparison. A do-it-all wing acting as a secondary facilitator and scorer. Inconsistency as a shooter is what held Batum back, and LaMelo is dealing with that as well. What he does better is willingness to still shoot these shots with volume. That bounds to keep the defense honest. Worst case scenario, he'll be a Jason Williams, a flashy playmaker that doesn't score efficiently and can't be the best player on a successful team. The first surprising pick was the Bulls selecting Patrick Williams. I love this kid, but this is still considered a reach. This isn't a big deal for the Bulls, who's got a pretty good team and can afford to be patient with Williams. Their new GM previously worked for the Nuggets, and they weren't afraid of stockpiling young prospects. Just look at how deep that Nuggets team is in this past year. They could have a future rotation of 3 really good modern bigs, but can also afford to trade one to upgrade the roster. I would compare his ceiling to Pascal Siakam, the prototype forward you would want in this modern NBA, but it also took him a few years to develop into who he is today. A realistic comparison with the Bulls right now would be Brandon Clark. He could be an impactful 6-man right away with his effort, and the stretchiness of Markkanen and Carter would allow Williams to play in and out. I know Williams has a more perimeter-oriented game, similar to Marcus Morris, but the Bulls have the right pieces to keep the game simple for him early on, similar to what the Grizzlies did with Brandon Clark. I guess Marcus Morris would be a nice middle ground between ceiling and realistic comparisons. At worst, I'd say his career would pan out like Patrick Patterson. He never maximized his potential, but has been a great role player. The defense is there, got just enough shooting, but couldn't develop a reliable niche to lean on. The discrepancy between the comparisons just shows how much patience the Bulls will need. Picking Isaac Okoro is a safe pick for the Cavs' weird roster construction. He definitely fits better than other high-ranking prospects, but also has one skill to lean on compared to Deni Avdija, and that's defense. His work ethic helps with building a culture, and his willingness to take a backseat on offense makes him a good complementary piece to the young core. The only downside is what they've done in previous drafts. After drafting both Garland and Sexton in consecutive years, they backed themselves in the corner in a guard-heavy draft. Also, I'm sure having Love and Drummond on the roster also stopped them from selecting a big like Okongwu. Things like this shouldn't dictate rebuilding teams' decisions, at least not this early in the rebuilding phase. OG Anunoby would be a ceiling, a 3-and-D guy who still has potential to provide more than just shooting on offense. It's gonna take some time for his jumper to develop, so realistically, I view him as a Jay Crowder. A player who defends and competes the whole game, and makes up his inconsistent 3-ball with volume. Worst case scenario, he'll be a Mo Harkless, a really good defender who does just enough on the offensive end to stay on the floor. The Hawks picking Onyeka Okongwu acts as both the best player available and also fills a need. Ever since they went into a rebuild, they've never selected a big man in the lottery, and Okongwu's stock is at an all-time high after the Celtics and Heat got deep in the playoffs with a player of his mold. Although they have Collins and Capella, they can let Okongwu slowly develop behind them, or also flip any one of them if they want an upgrade. With the Hawks' intention to compete now, having Okongwu playing as a backup could lead to a career trajectory similar to Bam Adebayo. That is also my best case scenario for Okongwu, where he becomes an anchor on both ends of the floor. That's gonna be scary next to Trae Young. My realistic comp is Clint Capella, because he's gonna be his understudy. With the Hawks upgrading their roster and their other young prospects, touches will be hard to come by to showcase his playmaking ability. At worst, he'll be similar to Taj Gibson, who made an impact as an energizer coming off the bench for most of his career. The Pistons needed a point guard and got the second best one in the draft. The Ringer actually had him as their top prospect due to his smooth passes and pull-up game. What I like about this pick is that it won't be another Cavs situation. The Pistons got their point guard to groom, but if the best prospect available in next year's draft is a guard, Hayes could slide to the 2 with his size and shooting potential. He was previously a teammate with Sekou Doumbia, so that's gonna help as well. D'Angelo Russell would be the perfect ceiling for Hayes. Both are smooth lefty scoring guards that caught the eyes of scouts with one-handed cross-court passes on the dime. Realistically, I see him as a Spencer Dinwiddie in the past 3 years. I see Hayes getting thrown in the fire from day one, so inefficient scoring would be expected, but 15 and 6 would be impressive for a 19-year-old rookie. Worst case scenario would be Dante Exum. His bust label is due to his injuries, but Hayes could suffer the same stagnant development if his jump shot potential doesn't even come close to fruition. The Knicks were eyeing Obi Toppin and got him without the need to trade up. That's a win in my book. He's the most proven player in the draft and also the safest with his ability to make an impact from day one. An athletic big with a modern offensive profile, which will help the Knicks get one step closer to relevancy. Defense is a worry, but the team has been finding a partner to cover up his weakness at center by signing Noel and a developing Robinson. With that said, it seems like Julius Randle won't be a Knick for too long, but he does have a similar skill set to get Toppin acclimated. I know there are plenty of comparisons to Amari Stoudemire as a ceiling, but I would prefer John Collins due to his development as a shooter and shot blocker. This would be essential playing next to non-shooting bigs. My realistic comparison is kind of skewed by the hiring of Tom Thibodeau, but I think of him as a modern Carlos Boozer. A physical scorer at power forward, who was more athletic than many remember. Of course, Toppin can still soar higher and longer in the air than Boozer, but he could also replace those ugly mid-range jumpers into threes. He wasn't much of a defender, but became a pretty good team defender in Thibodeau's system. At worst, he'll be an offensive specialist coming off the bench, a blend between Harrell and Randle. With Deni Avdija still on the board, he was an easy choice for the Wizards at number 9. He's a jack-of-all-trades player who plays hard on both ends. He does everything well, but there are also holes to each aspect. Like he's a good ball handler and playmaker, but lacks to shake off the dribble. Or he's a willing and capable defender, but lacks the lateral quickness against smaller players. Shooting is going to be a big swing that determines his career. Personally, I would have went with Devin Vassell for the Wizards' current roster construction, just because of his improved jumper, and the Wizards have Troy Brown, who has a similar skill set as Avdija. Nonetheless, this is still a good pick for potential, especially since the Wizards are one Bradley Beal trade request away from rebuilding. If everything breaks right for Avdija, I would compare him to Gordon Hayward, a 25-5 player who could be a top option, but also an amazing second fiddle. Realistically, I see him as a Joe Ingles, a 3-and-D guy who is a knockdown shooter, and his basketball IQ and competitiveness makes him a plus on the defensive end. He's also a capable secondary facilitator that relies on ball screen rather than one-on-one creation. Worst case scenario, he becomes a Thomas Satoransky, who the Wizards are familiar with. The Suns made the second surprise pick and chose Jalen Smith over Vassell and Haliburton. With most of their free agents being bigs, it does make sense to select one. I think the other reason they went with Smith is how the playoffs were filled with modern day bigs who can play both the 4 and 5. The Suns aren't going to give up on Ayton, but they're banking on Smith to become a player that can play behind or besides Ayton, which gives them the option to go big or small, depending on the situation. Also, 3-and-D skill sets are valuable, and even more rare in a big's body. Best case scenario, he'll develop into Serge Ibaka, an in-and-out big who can man the 4 and the 5. Center will still be his best position, but he'll still be effective enough to run dual big lineups. A realistic comparison would be Kelly Olynyk, with a bit more shot blocking. He's a stretch big who can spot up and shoot off screens, but also put the ball on the floor when he gets run off the line. He doesn't have the lateral quickness or agility guarding on the perimeter, but those are what Smith struggles with as well. At worst, I see him as a Gorgui Dieng, who isn't a bad player. A solid interior defender who can hit the 3 and flash some off-the-dribble skills. He actually started besides Cat for a full season and played decently well. I was gonna do this for all the lottery picks, but didn't realize I can blab on about 10 players for that long, and I didn't want to make another 18-minute video. I guess if this video gets 50 likes before the season starts, then I'll do the next 10 pick for another video. So remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Let me know what you guys think about these 10 picks and their fits with the team. It's a little late now, but follow me on Twitter to get some quick content and my takes on NBA news. I'll see you guys in the next video.